Hey, what's up, Spartan Nation? Welcome to another episode of the Spartan Nation Podcast. Here with your host, Matt Lonsberry, and my co host, Aiden Mulcrone. A little bit of a different show tonight. We're going to try to make this more fan led by you guys. And so we're going to take a lot of questions from you guys, answer as many as we can. But as we kind of let some people come in and get our viewership up a little bit here, we are going to start with our own topic, which is reacting to a 24/7 sports podcast earlier today that was put out on Twitter, talking about like where Michigan State's fan base, like where their panic meter should be, considering the 5-7 season last year, and where Michigan State is at in recruiting right now. I think they're number 48 on 24/7's team rankings. So we're going to start with that talk, and then go ahead and drop some questions in the queue and the comments, and eventually we'll get to those, and we'll open it up to those questions. So I guess Aiden, you brought up this topic, so I'll let you kind of take the lead on it. Can you kind of describe what was talked about in the podcast, and I guess their point of reference, what they were talking about with this whole panic meter thing?
So basically kind of it was the 24/7 football recruiting podcast. It was with Andrew Irvins, and it was a quote said, if you're a Michigan State fan, your panic meter should be high because of what your in-state rival is doing on the recruiting trail. And like you mentioned, that MSU right now is 48th in the country, and I think Michigan right now is currently top 5 in recruiting. Now, the numbers are, you know, different. MSU only has, I think MSU has
12
like
commitments.
12 commitments, and Michigan currently has 26. So there's 14 less players, but Michigan does have a higher average recruit rating, and yeah, they've won, some in-state battles with MSU, including couple players that MSU recruited hard, just even within the last couple of years.
Yeah,
Um, you know, but I think this isn't I guess I wouldn't say this isn't unnormal. Like it's pretty normal. Michigan has beaten MSU out in recruiting a lot,
sure.
just all time. I think that just it's if we're being honest, Michigan has a bigger brand. They have a lot more to sell. I think MSU has they're a little split in terms of investment. I think MSU is really invested in the basketball program as well as the football program. They want to both be at a high level of competition. I don't think Michigan is as invested in their basketball program as they are as football in terms of revenue sports. I think they're a lot more invested in football. So just um, for that reason, I think Michigan will always have a leg up in that way, and I don't think I don't think anyone will really dispute that. I think that's pretty common knowledge. But yeah, it's kind of how are they going to deal with that? I think Michigan State, if we had this conversation before June and everyone's saying your panic meter should be high, I would agree with that. But I think after watching what they did throughout June and what they've done already, the first few weeks in July, getting adding that 9 guys to that class that they've done in the last a month and a half, I would say my panic meter is actually lowered
Sure.
than been raised. So yeah, I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so like I agree with you in that sense. Like I think at the beginning of May, right after Keon Coleman enters the transfer portal, right after Peyton Thorne
Mhm.
enters the transfer portal, and Michigan State's got 3 guys in their recruiting class. Um, there was a lot of anxiety and panic kind of amongst the fan. We saw that on social media, like Facebook, Twitter, others, like, what is going on? And that was kind of our reaction too. Is like, okay, what's going on over there? But I do think some of that has been quelled by this good, summer stretch they've had on the recruiting trail. Landing Nick Marsh was a massive win. Um, Landing Anthony Carey, a 4-star running back out of Carrollwood Day in Tampa, Florida, like that's another big win. They're in it for David Stone, and that's a big fish to reel in, and we'll see if they can do that. And I think even in our last show we said like cautious optimism there. Like don't get your hopes up. It's worth noting that Michigan State is in that battle. And then, there's a couple other guys who like Jamari Howard was once a commit. He's a guy who visited again this summer, and maybe you can bring him back in. He's a 4-star corner. And so yeah, and even to not put too big of a thing on Andrew Ivins, and the other guy, his name was Cooper Patagna. That's probably butchered his last name, but I pulled him up on Twitter and wrote their names down. And Cooper said like his meter, if he was a fan, would be at like a 5 or 6 out of 10. Andrew was at like a 6 or a 7 out of 10. So they're not like bells and whistles going off panic either. But I think the concern being that just the last 2 years that Michigan has had, and how that has now started to translate for them on the recruiting trail. I think a piece of that is like during the Mark D'Antonio era, Michigan State took control of this rivalry. Like they won, I don't know the exact number, 7 out of 8, or for a decade stretch there. I mean, Michigan State won I think 8 out of 10, and then even when Harbaugh came to Michigan, you have trouble with the snap, and Michigan State knocks off Michigan that first year of Harbaugh, and then in 2017 in the rain, Michigan goes into that game as the favorite. Michigan State upsets them. 2020, like even for Mel Tucker's first year, he upsets Michigan again in the big house. And then we all remember the 2021 game that was 2 top 10 teams, one of the classic games of the rivalry. So like, I think I wouldn't describe it as panic. I would just say that Michigan State, as a fan base, as a program, they've gotten used to winning this game. And so you don't want to see that. You don't want to see that slip back into like what this rivalry was in the 90s, when it was pretty much dominated by Michigan, and even before the 90s too, before Mark D'Antonio got here. That's what you don't want to see, is it to be like, oh, Michigan State pops up every once in a while and upsets the big dog in Michigan, but like that's all that this program is. Like you don't want to see it fall back to that place. So I think that's where kind of the discussion can be had. As far as like comparing the classes, it is tough right now because to your point, like Michigan has I think 26 guys in their class. It I follow both programs pretty closely, to be honest with you. I'm always got an eye on what's going on over at Michigan. The class is good. I don't think it's this like next level class that it was kind of made out to be early on in the summer. There's a few guys that Michigan has pursued over the last or had been pursuing for a long time, but have made their decisions over the last 2 to 3 weeks who have gone elsewhere. And I think earlier in the cycle, they were expecting to land these guys and have it be this class that was just head and shoulders above any class that Harbaugh has landed there. I don't think it's that. I think it's one of his best classes, maybe even his best class, but like it's not this like no doubt knock out of the park class. I mean, they do have 19. I have it right here.
19
4-stars, which is that's impressive. But the average rating is like 90.76, which is high, but that's still probably top 10 to 15. I do think they are benefiting from just the number of commits that they have. But yeah, this is going to come down to like what Michigan State looks like on the field this year, though. We've talked about this a lot over the last several weeks. Like you have to see improvement on the field for Michigan State. You have to get back to a bowl game and kind of just show that the foundation that Tucker has laid here is starting to take root and it's starting to build upwards. Like I think and I'm certainly guilty of this. Like when Michigan State goes 11-2 in 2021 and Kenneth Walker just burst on the scene, and I think it hid a lot of the deficiencies that this program had for 1 year. Um, and I do think it did accelerate the rebuild. It's just that, that next recruiting class that was, a really good one for Michigan State, those guys are still freshmen or redshirt freshmen, true sophomores. So it's going to take some time for those guys to work their way up the depth chart. So no, I don't think panic's the right word. I think we have to see what this year looks like before any talk of panic comes into the equation. Any other thoughts on this, Aiden? I will say, like one of the quotes from the podcast, and I can't remember which guy said this, but he said, "I think this year is critical to the future of the program," and I do agree with that statement because um, if you miss a bowl game again this year, or God forbid, even like slide even further back, that can be used as a negative recruiting tool for a lot of different programs. And so you do have to see, like I said, you got to see that progress and that improvement this season on the field. And my gut tells me that I do think Michigan State gets back to a bowl game this year. It's a tough schedule. We've talked about that ad nauseum this summer too. But like, um, because of the nature of the schedule, I still don't know what their ceiling is. But I do think this team is going to be good enough and deep enough to get back into a bowl game, and we'll see what that looks like. Not too far away. We're under 50 days until Central Michigan, so we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think, if you take care of everything on the field, the recruiting, whatever happens off the field will follow and take care of itself. I mean, going back to the Michigan thing, I think I totally agree. Like they have 26 commits. Like they're not, that class isn't gonna grow any larger. They don't have any room for to grow unless they have, some guys decommit and then you add some other guys. But
Right.
I really think where Michigan has kind of won the battle between MSU as of late in terms of recruiting is just who they're recruiting, because I don't think Michigan has really, you know, step their game up. I mean, they've always had top 10 to 15 classes, and they're going to have another top 10 to 15 class this year. But in terms of who they're recruiting, I mean, Michigan has always, when they're at their best, like, going back to the, 90s and stuff, and like way before I was born, it was recruiting, it was winning, players out of Ohio. And that's
Sure.
really where that's changed. And, I've been pretty vocal about this, that, MSU hasn't gotten a single player out of Ohio in the last two cycles until, this 2024 class, which is
Right.
where D'Antonio excelled in.
Absolutely.
He would, take over those 3 stars in Ohio, and that was what won them, conference championships. And I think that's where Michigan is, in the right now. I think that's where they're excelling, is they're winning those recruiting battles with Ohio State, and they're kind of tapping more into the Midwest rather than the East Coast, which, that's what they were doing at the start of the Harbaugh era. And, now they've kind of transitioned to more, Ohio and local guys, and they've really flourished because of that. And, yeah, just recruiting that, Ohio has been kind of the key to any Big Ten team success. no matter who you are. I mean, even thinking about, schools like Wisconsin and Iowa recruiting guys out of Ohio has been important. So, yeah, just for that. And then, yeah, like I said, if MSU, I'm also confident that MSU will make a bowl game this season. And again, if you take care of, the things on the field, the stuff off the field will take care of itself. I don't think anyone is really expecting, no one's really setting a super high bar for, like 9 wins or anything like that. I think, expectations have been tampered, but also they're more realistic. I think they were very heightened last year, and
Yeah,
I mean, MSU still underachieved greatly by not making a bowl,
yep.
but at the same time, I don't think the top 25 and kind of the preseason hype, um, I mean, I'm guilty of that. I bought into that, but at the same time, that team was not top 25 ready whatsoever. But again, like, yeah, not saying they didn't underachieve, because they definitely did.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, 6-6, 7-5 is definitely showing they're on the right track. And, I would start to be concerned, and, you know, my panic meter would definitely go back up to where it was in, May and June if they don't make a bowl game. And it'd probably be a lot higher than it was in May or June.
Right. And, to kind of put a bow on this, and then we'll open it up for some questions. I think, like, I could be wrong on this, but I think, like, even during the Brady Hoke era, I think Michigan recruited better than Michigan State. If you just purely look at the rankings, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
but the difference was Mark D'Antonio's staff was miles ahead of the staff that Michigan had, as far as just coaching their positions, game planning, development, all of
Mhm.
that. Michigan State was just on a different level. Um, Now, with that said, Michigan staff is pretty good right now. I don't think you
Mhm.
can argue that. You don't win back-to-back Big Ten championships, make it to the playoff, beat Ohio State without having a good staff in place. I do think we're getting to a point now, or Michigan's getting to a point now, where they've been in the spotlight a couple of years. Other programs are looking at that coaching staff, and you could see some guys get poached this coming off, like next off season. We'll see what happens with Michigan this year. And then you're going to have a good chunk of those Michigan guys, go to the NFL draft this year. So can Michigan maintain what they've been over these last 2 years, and what I do expect them to be this year with just the amount of talent that they brought back? So that'll be something to watch. And again, if Michigan State shows the improvement this year, then all of a sudden in 2024, these higher level recruits that Tucker has brought in these last couple of years, all of a sudden they're now redshirt sophomores, juniors, seniors, and now they're the ones kind of leading the way. And we'll see what happens with Michigan State going forward. But like, this is just a very important building block year for Michigan State to, again, just show that improvement and to be able to sell future recruiting classes on, hey, we're heading in the right direction. Okay, like, yeah, 2022 was a disappointing year. I do think the amount of injuries that Michigan State sustained early on last year was devastating, because they just didn't have the depth that you needed to compete in a tough conference like the Big Ten, when a lot of your, like, Darius Snow, Xavier Henderson, Jacob Slade, Peyton Thorne gets banged up pretty early. They had some different rotations along the offensive line throughout the year. It's like there was a lot of things
Right.
that went wrong, and Michigan State as a program was not in a position where they could withstand those types of misfortunes. And
Yeah.
and that played out completely last year. So with that, let's open it up for some questions. So yeah, if you guys want to submit those in the comment section, we'll answer as many of those as we can. I know you guys have been kind of chatting amongst yourselves in there, which is great. There was one from Keys to Wisdom. We'll pull up his first. How much more favorable do you think the schedule gets once the divisions are over and Michigan is the only annual game? So I'll let you take the lead on that one, Aiden. Oh, and just like for those who aren't in the know, in 2024, USC and UCLA are coming to the Big Ten, and divisions will be no more, and there will be this kind of round robin schedule where Michigan is Michigan State's only annual game, and then they kind of rotate other Big Ten teams. So your thoughts, Aiden?
Yeah, so I'm trying to pull up here okay, so the future schedule. So for 2024, MSU, you know, they have Michigan again. They play Penn State, Ohio State again. Kind of pretty much every team that they've already played like within the last 2-3 years. And then 2025 is where they start to play. They go on the road to USC, host UCLA. They play Penn State and Michigan. So yeah, you get rid of Ohio State, but you're still playing a pretty brutal schedule. And I mean, no matter what year it is, traveling to the West Coast is going to be difficult. I can't remember, besides the Rose Bowl in 2014, I don't even know the last time MSU won a game on the West Coast during the regular season. It had to be a long time ago.
Yeah, they did a home and home with Oregon, but
Yeah,
I think
they
they lost
lost
at
that, yeah.
Oregon. Okay,
Yeah,
they
so I
played in
mean,
the they played Washington State, I think, in a bowl game over there, but that was like
yeah.
a lower level one. But yeah, to your point, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. So I mean, divisions, it's just going to be a year by year basis. I think in terms of expectations, I would expect Michigan State to capitalize not playing Ohio State in 2025, but also at the same time, like 2024 is going to be again like it's a similar schedule, you know, this is a young team. I would expect them to, develop and grow. So I think it's a mix of kind of the coaching and development and who we see from this year, and then kind of just in terms of strength of schedule as a whole and who they play in the following years. But I mean, adding UCLA and USC, I mean, it's huge just for the conference as a whole, and it's going to make it a lot harder. Um, and just like we've been talking about, just Michigan being so much better, within the last 2 years is, it's tough already as it is. So
Sure.
I think, yeah, I think, it's a year by year basis. I think it will be, there will be years where MSU will have, one of the hardest schedules in college football as a whole. And there will be years where it's like, okay, this might not be the best MSU team ever, but I can still see them going, 8-4 because they, missed out playing Ohio State and USC and such.
Right. To give my 2 cents on this, like to your point, next year is like almost identical to what their schedule would have looked like if the divisions were still in place. I think they play 6 teams or they play 5 games against all of the traditional East Division opponents, and
Mhm.
then they play, um, or no, it would be 6. Yeah, 6 games against the traditional East opponents, and then they play 3 teams who would have been crossover opponents in the West. So next year is going to look very similar. They're going to play Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan again. Um, I think going like after 2024 and then going on, when you bring in USC, you bring in UCLA. To your point, it's going to be kind of a year by year thing. Like you're not going to be locked into having to play Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State every year. And so you could have a year where maybe you just play Michigan and USC, and then other Big Ten teams that aren't Penn State or Ohio State.
Right.
You might, I mean, God forbid you have a year where you play Michigan, USC, Penn State, and Ohio State all in the same year. That would be brutal,
Yeah.
just in Big Ten play. But like I think it's going to fluctuate here and there. I don't think it gets a whole lot, I mean, not a whole lot easier. Like you're going to have some years that are easier, I think, than the traditional East Division schedule. But I like when you add USC and what they kind of their projection with Lincoln Riley now. Like we could see that program return to being a top 10 annual program that they were in the early 2000s before. I mean, I don't know, when did you start watching
Like
college
Pete,
football,
yeah,
Aiden?
like Pete Carroll
Pete
era.
Carroll era, yeah, I
Yeah.
remember it. I was born in '92, so that was kind of when I was first starting to fall in love with college football a little bit. I remember the early 2000 Miami teams, and those USC teams. Like that was kind of my introduction to college football. So like we could see a return for USC to that level going forward. So I don't think it's going to get much easier. I think again, there's going to be some years where you're not going to have to play three top like preseason top 15 top 10 teams like you're going to get this year. Or my thing, I guess I'll take it in this direction. I'm wondering how this is going to impact Michigan State's non-conference scheduling going
Mm.
forward, because um, like right now we know Michigan State's Big Ten opponents for 24 and 25. I don't know how often those schedules are going to get revealed, but you would think that they were going to have to give programs at least a few years had notice that so then when they're putting together non-conference schedules, um, they can like manage that, because if we've got USC, Ohio State, and Michigan on the schedule, like you're probably not going to go schedule Texas or Oklahoma or an SEC school in the
Right.
non-conference, right? So like that's kind of what I'm intrigued to see, is how that'll impact the non-conference schedule going forward.
Right. So they
Um,
have Boston College, a home and home for 24 and 25, and then they have the rest of the teams they play are uh, FAU and Louisiana in 24, and then 25 they play Western Michigan and Youngstown State. So it's not like Boston College is a powerhouse team. Like that's a manageable Power Five team. But I do understand what you're saying. Like, do you just go to scheduling three group of five teams or like three group of five FCS teams every year? Or do you still try to make, a trip out to Oregon or Washington every once in a while, or yeah, like you're saying.
right,
So yeah, but I do, yeah, I will say, like, I'll end on this. Just as much as the regular season will matter, the expansion of a 12 team playoff is still kind of coming up, so that doesn't completely knock all of MSU's hopes in terms of postseason, but
right,
also at the same time, there's no divisions either. So it's not like, you know, the East has won every single Big Ten championship game. So it's not
right,
like you're just going to play, Purdue. You're going to have to play the second or the best team in the conference. So while you may duck and Ohio State and USC potentially, if you do somehow manage to make it to the championship game, you're gonna have to play them.
right.
No matter what, you're gonna have to go through one of those 4 or 5 top teams.
Sure. Aiden, you want to address this one while I kind of look through the comments for more
Yeah.
comments and questions?
So Jonathan Kim, the transfer from North Carolina, is coming in. I believe he should already be at MSU, ready for fall practice. There's not really much more to add to that. So he should be their place kicker for this season.
Okay. How about this one in regards to, Michigan State has struggled to get off the field on third downs in recent years. So, like, I think this would be like one of those areas of improvement that we've been talking about. That's not necessarily
Right.
just improving the record, but like in situations, how can Michigan State show improvement as far as like, man, it just seemed like so many times the last 2 years, really, even in the good 2021 season, third and 10, third and 9, third and 15, and you give up a big pass play because that secondary has been shaky at best. So, um, yeah, I guess your thoughts on this, Aiden.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the defensive backs have not been great, and kind of MSU has, I don't want to say embrace, but they've kind of acknowledged that their defense has been bend don't break kind of. You don't want that ideally, where they kind of give up all the space between, the 220-yard lines. And then once you get to the red zone, it's kind of like you run out of space, so you have to make a decision. And even though they still settle for field goals, that's still points on the board. So I think for MSU, I think their defensive backs did better last year, but not having, a pass rush because a lot of their edge rushers got injured, definitely hurt them a lot. And I think this year having, healthy defensive line and adding a lot to that defensive line and pass rush should make a difference on third downs, you would hope. So that's kind of where I'm at, and I really can't say whether it's going to be better or not. You just have it. It's just kind of a show me. I know someone in the comments said this is kind of a show me season, and I
Right.
agree with that. It is definitely show me.
I think this is kind of where Jim Salgado, the new cornerbacks coach, comes in a little bit. Like, what can he bring from his experience in the NFL? Because I mean, not that not that NFL coaches are necessarily have brighter minds than college coaches, but just like from his experience and the peoples he's rubbed shoulder with, like on the defensive side of the ball, about third down situations, like what can he bring to Scotty Hazelton, the defensive coordinator, when they're in meeting rooms, and like we'll see how that kind of just the impact that he makes in that area. Um, had a couple more. Another one from Cameron. Realistically, when do you see this Spartan team being a top 15 team again? Not in 2023, unfortunately. Uh, Again, like we've touched on this a little bit. I think I don't want to sell this coming season short because I I wouldn't be surprised or shocked if Michigan State rebounds and wins 8 games, goes 8-4 this year. Like, not shocked. Like, I would be surprised, probably not shocked, but I don't. That's not going to get you top 15. I think top 15 is back to like the 11-2, maybe a 10-3, like with a bowl win or something like that, and then you get the final boost in the. Um, I think 2024 at the earliest, and that's if things kind of fall your way this year and you bring in another. I think a lot of this is dependent on this recruiting class that they're working on right now too. So I would say, when you see this team being top 15, it's tough because it's just so hard to project outward. But I'll say 2025. You get Michigan back in East Lansing in 2025. So 2025 is what I would say realistically. But I wouldn't be shocked if it was 2024. But I'll just for the sake of discussion, I'll say 2025. How about you, Aiden?
Yeah, I think 2025 is a fair take. I don't really see them um winning more than 9 games in 2024 either, just because they have a very similar schedule to this year. But yeah, 2025, I think they can manage it a little bit better. And yeah,
You miss Ohio State in 2025. Now
right,
you do have to play USC and Michigan.
right.
I don't know about Penn State in 25 off the top of my
I
head. I don't
don't
remember.
I don't think so. Or no, they do play Penn State, but it's at home.
Okay.
So they have Penn State at home.
Okay, we're just going to do a little bit more scanning here for some questions. There was this thing from Kyle about a rumor on David Stone, but he didn't really elaborate. So, Kyle, if you want to elaborate on that in the comments, I would love to hear it. Yeah, the rumor that you've heard. So, and then this is just a topic that I won't spend a whole lot of time here. But I am in full agreement. I do not like the
Yeah,
12
I
team
agree.
playoff.
Yeah.
Honestly, this is probably a hot take. And I was somebody in the early 2010s who was like pounding the table for a college football playoff, and then when the 14 playoff came, I was ecstatic. Um, Having seen how things have played out with the playoff and how it has impacted bowl games, um, opting out of bowl games was not really a thing before the playoff, and maybe would have come regardless. But this is probably a hot take, but I think if I was like king of college football and I got to make all the decisions, in addition to like halting all the conference realignment, I think I might go back to the BCS system, just because I just college football used to be about more than just the national championship. It used to be more regional in nature. Regional rivalries. Oklahoma State's gonna potentially go away forever once Oklahoma joins the SEC. I put myself in that perspective. Like, what if that had happened to like the Michigan State rivalry, and how just horrible that would be for this state. And so I feel for the state of Oklahoma, or especially Oklahoma. Probably more Oklahoma State fans than Oklahoma fans, just
Right.
because they're the ones kind of getting left behind,
Right.
if you want to put it that way. So yeah, but like as far as like the 12-team playoff, on one hand, like it is going to give some exciting matchups um, late in the year, and so I understand like there are definitely some pros to it as well. But like the thing I don't like is I like the fact that certain games were meant to be played one time per year, like Michigan Ohio State, Michigan State once per year. Some other rivalries, the Iron Bowl, Texas Oklahoma. Like there's certain ones that is like you got one shot a year to play these teams, and I don't like the idea of rematches in college football, for conference championship games, for playoffs. The NFL
Yeah.
is its own thing, and I feel like college football is trying to become like NFL light, and I just like those two things to be separated. So that's just my opinion. Do you have anything to add with that, Aiden?
No, I totally agree. I think really there's only been 2, maybe 3 seasons where we've needed a 4-team playoff. Um,
Right.
and even, yeah, like a lot of those semifinals are blowouts. So, I mean, I think this year was the first year where both games were one possession games in the semifinals, and both games were really good and fun to watch. But this was the first time in the whatever 8 seasons that they've had the playoff.
Right. Um, Sorry, just kind of searching
Oh,
through questions here. Keys to wisdom. I don't know if this is a sarcastic question or not about Jake Stone, just because he struggled just as much as any of the kickers last year. Um, but I do think it's unfortunate that, and I was he part, he would have been part of the 2022 class.
yeah, I
Yeah.
heard.
Um, I don't know exactly what happened with Jack Stone, not Jake Stone, Jack Stone. I do think he was one of the higher rated kickers of his recruiting class. Obviously, the
Yeah,
kicking was just a disaster last year. The kicking game. Punting was fantastic with Bryce Behringer, and then the kicking game was. It's funny, like, could Bryce Behringer not kick field goals? Because this is
right.
like the first time this has occurred to me. But maybe they should have just trotted him out there to kick field goals and extra points too. But um, yeah, like obviously I would expect Michigan State will probably be looking for a kicker to add to their recruiting class this year. We'll see what happens with that. But Jonathan Kim probably has a few years of eligibility left. Um, Cameron, if you could provide some more context for this, I don't remember if maybe this was in reference to
Oh,
the
the third
the third
downs.
down
Yeah.
thing.
I mean, the scheme for the defensive backs. I mean, I think it was a little bit of both. I think schematically it can be hard when, I mean, any college is going to run a complex defense, like way more complex than, high school, and when you have a lot of young guys or a lot of, guys in a new system, because they did move from kind of Mike Tressel's defense to Scotty Hazelton's, which was more of a 4-2-5. There's there's different things schematically, and you saw a lot of players move different positions. I mean, you saw Darius Snow kind of play at nickelback, and now he's a linebacker. You saw Angelo Gross, Chester Kimbrough, kind of who guys who were a safety in a corner now move to nickel. It really changes the whole scheme defensively, and you have to know those guys who are playing multiple positions have to know multiple different roles. And just like it's complex, and it is to an extent somewhat rocket science for some players. And I think the first year, um, I think 2021 was a little bit because of the players that were in place, and just a little mix of that. But I do think last year, I don't think the defensive backs were really the problem, as much as the lack of pass rush, because that really hurt them more than anything last season. And I think this year it will be the same case, because I do think that the defensive backs did get they got better. You could tell towards the end of the season they got better, and I think with majority of those guys coming back, the just law of averages and like development, you would think they would improve even more. And it really is going to matter about that front 6 or 7 for MSU's defense moving forward.
How do you feel about the edge rushers this year? Like if Bogle's healthy again, you add Ten Mice, Adelaide, former 5-star from Texas A&M. You've got Jacoby Winmond, who is probably moving to linebacker this year, but he's probably going to come off the edge, on
Right.
occasion too. So how do you feel about the edge rush going into this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's really going to be about I mean, I was listening to SEC media days, and Jimbo Fisher talked about, he was like, there's 3 things. He said availability, accountability, and dependability. And I think that's the name of the game for MSU's defense right now, is availability and
Yeah,
dependability.
right.
Um, I think availability is the biggest thing for that front line. Especially, you know, we saw Bogle show flashes within, that the first game. I think he had a sack or two against Western, and then, before getting injured. So I think he could be a good mix of kind of, those those passing downs. He can be a solid guy off the edge with Windman, being on passing downs. And then, you get into those kind of short yardage situations. You can move Windman to linebacker, and then you have Tunmisa Dele, coming off the edge, and you can move him in the interior as well. I think there's a lot of things they can do with that front line, because they have a lot, and there is an incoming class. These incoming freshmen, there's a lot of upside and potential that maybe some of these guys can get on the field this season. And we have MSU has a new defensive line coach with Deron Reynolds, and he's really got he's got a full load of
Yeah,
kind of just kinks and bugs that need to be fixed for this season to really meet expectations and kind of go where they want to go, not only as a unit, as a defense, but also as a program.
right. Kyle, is I do believe like 4-2-5 has been the scheme that Scotty Hazelton has
Yep.
utilized since he's been here. So unless we see some kind of dramatic shift in philosophy, I think we will see the 4-2-5 again this year. Now, how like 4-2-5 is just that base set. like
Hmm.
how to use the safeties. Do the safeties come down a little more and help in the run game, or like, so we'll see like what adjustments are made. But yeah, that base set I believe is still going to be the 4-2-5, which in the modern era of college or just modern era of football, you almost always have to have three corners on the field at all
Right.
times, unless until you play a team like Michigan, who typically likes to use its tight ends more
Hmm.
than like a slot receiver, thing like that. But for
Right.
most programs, you're going to have three corners and then the two safeties on the field. So yeah, 4-2-5 is what we expect this year. Um, my buddy Matt McCartney, he asked about offensive scheme change with the new quarterback. I don't think there'll be a huge change. Again, Jay Johnson's still the offensive coordinator. I think it'll just be, as far as the quarterback position. Um, in 2021, we got to see Peyton Thorne use his legs a little bit more, and a lot of that I think had to do with just his overall health. So I am interested to see how or if Michigan State utilizes the quarterback run a little bit this season, either by design or rollouts or things like that. Do you have any thoughts on that, Aiden, as far as using them? Like, because by a lot of accounts, Noah Kim and Katen Hauser do have enough mobility to be able to
Hmm.
make some things happen. So how do you see that kind of playing out?
Yeah, I mean, I think the quarterback play will, Jay Johnson in terms of play calling, it will depend a lot on just who he trusts and how much he trusts them. But I think in terms of I think if we were going to see a change in scheme, it would be more due to the offensive line. I think because of how questionable they really were last year, just with the in the run game, I think that's really what it is because I think Jay Johnson wants to, I think any offensive coordinator wants to be able to rely on running the ball at all times. And they couldn't really do that last year. So I think if they can rely on running the ball, I think schematically it will help the quarterbacks and really kind of open up that playbook for him. But if they can't run, I think Chris Kapilovich has done a really good job in terms of the offensive line for pass protection. But yeah, I mean running the ball and kind of how those running backs do this year also is gonna I think will be a big determining factor on the quarterback play and just the offense in general.
Right. Um, this is in reference to the 4-2-5 again. Yeah, the Indiana game, especially that second half. Indiana did a lot of just spreading team, like spreading you out with wide receivers, and then they just ran the ball against that. It kind of turned into a five-man front for Michigan State because they would use a tight end or somebody to suck one of the linebackers out, and there wasn't good adjustments made in the Indiana game. There's
Yeah.
no there's no doubt about that, and that was that was the low point of last season, right, Aiden? Like blowing a 17
It
point
had to
lead
it had to
to
be.
Indiana. Yeah, that was
I
just kind
would,
of like
yeah.
the
I think
final nail in the
everyone would
coffin
agree.
of the bull
Right.
chase or whatever too. So yeah, we'll move on from that. um, just to update with Kyle, he just the David Stone thing. Kyle heard on Locked On Spartans that he's going to OU. That has been kind of like Oklahoma has been the favorite in
Yeah.
David Stone's recruitment. And he said Brian Smith did the reporting, so appreciate that, Kyle. Just updating on that. Yeah, we'll see what happens with it. Obviously, like I said, that's the whole cautious optimism thing. I do think Michigan State's done a good job in the David Stone recruitment, but he's a tough fish to pull in. So we'll see what happens with it. Um, Keys to Wisdom asks, how many backs do you see getting serious carries per game, and which ones? We've talked about this a little bit this summer, but I do think it's going to be a primarily Jalen Berger and Nathan Carter, the transfer from UConn, getting the majority of those snaps, like between the 20s, if you will. And then I think you're going to see Jaron Mangum in situations like third and short, maybe some red zone situations, kind of maybe that Elijah Collins role last year,
Hmm.
which was we talked about this too. Like the Elijah Collins rotation. I know it really bugged you last year, just the when they chose to use him or not using him enough. You felt like he had earned more carries than maybe a Jarek Broussard, who didn't kind of live
Yeah.
up to what we kind of expected last year. So that's kind of my take on this. Is I think you're going to get a heavy dose of Carter and Berger, and then I do think Mangum might be a game changer on those third and short situations. So, any thoughts on the running back rotation, Aiden?
Yeah, I think it's definitely I mean, it's very intriguing to me. I wonder I know. I think when I look at Jaren Mangum, I think he's more of a goal line kind of guy that you can use in a larger package. And then, you have Berger and Nathan Carter kind of in terms of a balance of, speed and a little bit, Berger's got speed and some power. So yeah, kind of how do you utilize those three? I'm definitely intrigued. I couldn't tell you. My guess would be week one that Jalen Berger gets majority of the touches, but I wouldn't be surprised if any of those two other guys take the lead either week one or somewhat into the season. So yeah, again, and then yeah, again, it goes back to that kind of the offensive line as well and how well they perform. But yeah, this
Right.
is definitely an intriguing position, if not the most intriguing on the besides quarterback.
Sure. Yeah, like to that point a little bit. I do think that Berger developed a little bit better chemistry as the year went on, and I think Michigan State ran the ball a little bit better in the second half of the year. And so, yeah, we could see that with Berger this year having a year under his belt with the offensive line and kind of getting used to the scheme too, like and how he's being coached to approach what he's seeing in front of him and things like that. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it's Berger more so at the beginning of the year, and we'll see what happens with Carter as he was recovering from the shoulder, and but also just getting used to the scheme, getting used to like again that chemistry with the offensive line and things like that. So had another one, kind of a long one from Kerry Ellis, but kind of going back to the whole Big Ten schedule talk and adding two quality teams in USC and in UCLA, and he asked about November wins. This is kind of interesting because traditionally Michigan State plays Michigan in October, and so like just because Michigan has the Ohio State game at the end of the year, and so typically like that's like their mid-year rivalry game. Um, so yeah, this is kind of an interesting question, just because a lot of teams traditionally their schedule lines up where November has always been big, but then you get that rivalry week at the end of the year, and so Alabama's playing Auburn, Florida and Florida State are playing. Michigan's playing Ohio State, and then traditionally Michigan State's played Penn State, which that's a quality opponent. It's just
Mhm.
not that traditional rivalry. So
Right.
yeah, this is kind of going to come down to what Michigan State's November schedule looks like. We mentioned with just the added quality of teams that are going to be in the Big Ten, just the amount of quality teams, you do feel like there's going to be at least one of those top dogs in November. And I also think like as far as like how on a scale of 1 to 10, like you want to have that momentum if you're going into either a conference championship game or this 12-team playoff. If you're some ranked between like 10 to 15, let's just say, uh, like you need a statement win. And so a lot of that, and we're a society that's always like the last thing that's happened is what we kind of cling to. So that last image in your mind. So um, yeah, I mean, it's always going to be important. I would say 8, 9, 10 on the scale as far as like how big of these games are. But it does depend on what the schedule looks like.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, like once you expand to a 12-team playoff, I think it makes it a little less important and just it kind of feels like every game isn't as important isn't as important as it used to be. I mean, I'm sure, the Michigan game will always be a big game. It's not that it won't be, but there is a different, feeling to it where it's like, okay, for example, like Washington, like if MSU hypothetically, if MSU was kind of contending this season for, a playoff appearance, this Washington game is huge, and it's huge
Massive.
for Washington. So,
Right.
like, they are contending. So, you know, 5 years down the road, if that game's being played and MSU beats Washington, you know, this year, Washington might be out of the playoff. But,
Right.
5 years down the road, Washington's still in the hunt, and they might not get the bye game, but they're still in that 12-team playoff, which it kind of it doesn't make it as fun anymore, which
I agree.
it sucks, but
A
that's
big
what it
thing was
is.
like, think about some of those years, like when Lincoln Riley was still at Oklahoma,
Right.
and like Iowa State would upset them or something like that.
Mhm. Right.
Like that's huge when even in a 4-team playoff or the BCS era, because that is like a devastating loss back then.
Yeah.
Whereas like it's still a bad loss, and all of a sudden your margin for error is shrunk a little bit in the 12-team playoff, but it's not like a season ending thing like it used to be. Or there
Right.
was this was probably mid 2000s where Penn State goes to Iowa, and I think Penn State was ranked like number 3 or something like that, and Iowa upsets them, which they like to do in Kinnick,
Right.
against top 5 opponents. The Michigan Iowa game in 2016,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
Michigan's ranked number 2 and they lose to Iowa, and then they lose double overtime at Ohio State, and that knocks them out of the playoff, because
Mhm.
if Michigan beats Iowa, I think there's a chance that they still make the playoff with a double overtime loss at Ohio State. So yeah, those are the kind of things that you're kind of losing with the 12-team playoff. I will say one thing that I really like about the 12-team playoff is that you were going to get playoff games on campus, at least for that first round. I think that's really
Mhm.
cool. I can't wait. I can't wait for an SEC team to have to come up and play a Big Ten team in December on the Big
Yeah.
Ten in a Big Ten stadium. Can't wait for that,
Yeah.
because all the bowl games are either south or west. Like no, they're
Right.
or played indoors if you're Detroit. The Motor City
Yeah.
Bowl. So I can't wait for SEC team to have to come up and play in
Right.
the snow in December. Like I'm chomping at the bit of that. I wish the first 2 rounds were on campus, but that's a different discussion. But back to questions from you guys. Cameron asked about young breakout wide receivers. We've talked about this a little bit this summer, but you wrote a story on this, Aiden, so I'll let you take the lead on it.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think Jaron Glover, was a player who a lot of coaches and people around the program were really high on in the spring, and how well he played. He's gonna be a redshirt freshman. Just all those redshirt freshmen. Tyrell Henry is going to be in the slot, or kind of you can play him outside as a speedy player outside. He's a smaller guy. He's probably around like 5'7", or sorry, not 5'7", 5'11", and like 180 ish
Okay.
range. I would guess he's definitely less than 200 pounds, but he's definitely a speedster, and at the minimum, he's gonna be a huge help, replacing Jaden Reed on special teams as a kick returner. And yeah, like that's the bare minimum for him, and he could be a really solid weapon for whoever the quarterback may be. Um, Offensively, you have Antonio Gates Jr. I know he had a pretty big highlight in the spring game.
Right.
He's not as talked about as kind of around the program as much as Glover or Henry, but he is a player that definitely is in contention for playing time and a spot. And I mean, I've said this time and again, but again, this whole season is just about kind of earning it and showing it. So I think he's got a lot to prove. I think all three of those guys really have a lot to prove on a young team. I know they brought in some transfers. I know Alante Brown came in from Nebraska, who
Yep.
was a late addition after Keon Coleman left. But he's a guy that's definitely, again, will compete for playing time and could potentially be a starter. And really, Trey Mosley's kind of the only guy right now that you can pencil in for, he's gonna start from day one and
Yeah.
he's gonna play at all. And the rest of those guys, we don't really know if they're gonna even play or not. So
Right.
yeah,
Montori
I mean,
Foster is another name that I've kind of
right,
heard this
right.
offseason,
He's an
more so
older
even
guy.
recently. Yeah, he's not
Yeah,
he's not a young guy. He's an
yeah,
upperclassman who just hasn't, like, you had Jalen Naylor, you had Keon, you had Jaden Reed, so there was just a limited amount of
right.
snaps available to Foster, but he's another guy that I've heard some buzz about this offseason. But like, to your point, like, we're going to go into fall camp and there's going to be spots available for guys to compete
Mhm,
and to win. So that'll be what's, it's funny, like, I think running back is pretty. We talked about running back, but I think that's pretty well established. But
mhm,
quarterback, we're going to find out who the starting quarterback is. We're going to find out who's going to fill those wide receiver spots. I do think whoever wins the quarterback job is going to have an impact on who gets those reps at wide receiver. Maybe just based on upperclassmen, lowerclassmen, just the chemistry between them. So uh, I think offensive line is. Like, JD Duplain's going to start. Nick Samac's going to start at center. Duplain's a guard. And then one of the tackles
I
is
think yeah, my guess would be Brandon Baldwin will start and Keyshawn Blackstock will start at the two tackle positions.
okay. So you think Brown's going to get supplanted then?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
I do.
Okay. And then the other guard, Gino Vandemark, I think is kind
Mhm.
of like the favorite to win the other guard position. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of questions answered when we get to Central about, like, which guys are going to be your first 11.
Mhm.
So obviously looking forward to that. We're up over an hour now, so if you guys have any more questions, get those submitted now, because we're probably going to wrap things up here pretty quick. I think there was another one that I saw. Let's see here. Maybe there wasn't. Oh, basketball question. Who's going to start at the 5 spot? Izzo has a good problem on his hands. That's an excellent question. We talked about this a little bit earlier this year. Um, at the beginning of summer, I think I was leaning towards Carson Cooper actually as the starter. Now, after seeing the way that Jackson Kohler has slimmed down, and then he scores 50 at Moneyball, which we've talked about Moneyball and the nature of the Moneyball tournament, but I think there is potential that it could be Jackson Kohler at the 5 to start the year. What do you think, Aiden?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd still go Mahdi to be.
Okay,
I'd still go Sissoko to begin the season, and I think the 4 spot is very intriguing as well because
right.
you have two freshmen who could potentially start there along with Malik Hall.
Yeah, you got Malik Hall coming back from just the things that the procedures as he had to correct
Yeah.
some of the things that went wrong last year. You got Xavier Booker, Cohen Carr could start at the 4. It's interesting with State. I got this like line right down my face from the blinds here in the room, but um, because you've got Hogard, Walker, and Akins, you're pretty much starting 3 guards. And so that kind of shrinks the rotation a little bit for the bigs. Whereas traditionally, you've got two guards and then you got 2 forwards in the center. And I know basketball's become kind of more positionless as the years have gone on here, but just intrigued by that a little bit to see like what the rotation looks like. But yeah, I'll give you like Hogard, Walker, Akins. I think are going to start. I think I'm going to go Cohen Carr and Jackson Kohler, which is probably not right because I think Izzo would probably bristle at the idea of starting a true freshman. But that's the one I'm going to throw out there right now as potential starters for the start of the year. But I could be wrong. I probably am wrong, to be honest with you. You're probably right about Sissoko just at the beginning of the year, just because of the experience that he has. But um, who do you have? So you've got, I'm sure you've got the three guards. That's pretty well
Right.
established. And then Sissoko. So who are you starting at four at the beginning of the year?
I think beginning of the year will be Malik Hall just
Okay.
because that seniority, but I do think one of the two between Booker and Carr, and my guess would be Carr will take him over because yeah, I think having experience on the bench is something Izzo values. Having, Malik Hall, sacrificed his starting spot to come off the bench last year too. So it's not
Right.
like he hasn't done it before. So I think, yeah.
Yeah. And I do think Cooper Kohler can be like, that's a situational thing. Like, you could
Mhm.
go offense, defense, Kohler for offense, Cooper for defense. So yeah, they're like, oh man, this roster. I tell you what, as much as depth was a concern the last 2 years, this team is going to have so much depth, and Izzo's going to have so many options to play with. I'm telling you, like the hype is real as far as the basketball team this coming winter. Odds of getting average or above output from quarterback, punter, and kicker. Um, I think, man, I'm thinking of quarterback right now. Um, somewhere between 2021 Peyton Thorne and 2022 Peyton Thorne. I think it's going to be better than what we saw last year. I don't know that it's going to reach the levels we saw in 2021 just because you don't. I mean, I know we've beaten this to death, but you don't have Kenneth Walker in the backfield.
Mhm.
And he just gobbled so much attention, so many eyeballs. The play action was just devastating for opponents in 2021 because you had to respect Kenneth Walker. So like it's not going to reach that level. Um, but I think the offense cohesiveness is going to just be a little bit better than it was last year, and that's going to translate into either Kim or Hauser. I'm going to be totally honest here. I don't know what to expect from the specialists. I'm doing this series right now where I'm kind of breaking down one thing I like, one thing I don't about every position group. And the other day I thought about, man, when I get to special teams, I don't even know what I'm going to write about because it's a big, giant question mark. Bryce Behringer was so good last year. So, do you have any thoughts on the specialists, Aiden?
Yeah, I mean it's hard to top what Bryce Behringer did like the last two
Sure.
seasons, as
Yeah.
first team All-American. So I mean, if you're grading on that scale, I would say it's gonna be underwhelming, but you can still get I think you can still get average output from a punter and the kicker for this season. I think once you have a guy, it just works, like it just clicks. But if like we saw last year, if you don't have one, it's kind of a big issue. And MSU has been consistent having a kicker, for the better part of 15 the last like 15 20 years. And now the last year or two post, kind of the last year of Matt Coughlin was not the greatest.
Yeah, he
And
had some
then
injury stuff.
right, and then after he left, people thought it couldn't get worse, and it did. So
Yeah.
yeah, so there's some issues there that once they find a guy, I mean, I'd like to believe they think Jonathan Kim will be the answer there. So um you can really only hope for that. But in terms of quarterback, I think yeah, it's really just going to depend on, on that offensive line. Can they play? Can they have a balance between the run and the pass game? And I think depending on that will be whether or not they have, an average or, above average kind of performance from, Kim or Hauser, whoever it is.
Right, and the tight ends too, like just being able to do both receiving and run blocking. I don't know if you saw, I got called out by Malik Carr on Twitter today because he didn't like what I had to say in my one thing I like, one thing I don't, in the tight ends group, because I questioned his blocking ability, and that was kind of a thing for like the whole tight end group. It wasn't. I mean, I did single out Carr a little bit in the article. It was kind of, so I do one thing I like, one thing I don't, and then one thing to watch for. And then so my one thing to watch for was pretty much, is Malik Carr gonna kind of live up to the hype that he's kind of had over the last a couple of seasons, and I think a big part of that is his ability to stay on the field because of his run blocking, and he didn't like that very much. So hey, prove me wrong. Like I'm not here to take shots at guys. I call it how I see it, and if he proves me wrong, that's going to be huge for Michigan State as an offense. So Keith, quickly answer your question. Yes, I think there's an excellent chance that it could be Hauser instead of Kim. I don't have any inside. I don't think anybody has inside knowledge on that, because they're going to keep that close to the vest at least until probably midway through fall camp. So yeah, I do think Hauser has as good of a shot to start as Kim. I think when you and I have talked about it, Aiden, I think you're leaning towards Hauser as the starter, like what you expect, not what you would do, but what you expect.
Um, yeah, I mean, I would say, yeah, I think it's, I don't think it's a secret that, a lot of people and believe that Hauser has a higher ceiling than Kim, but it is instant results kind of, that's what they want. It's not building for the future. It's not the NFL where you can kind of scrap a season. It is always win now in college. So
Right.
if they think that Kim will give them the best chance to win this year, I think that's who they're gonna start. But I do think Hauser, I think it is his job to lose. But
Okay.
and I believe that. So
All right. I think, and this is just purely my gut, and it's not even strong, because on a scale of like 100, I think I would go 55 Kim, 45 Hauser, like where I'm
yeah,
at. But
that's fair.
that's just like, it has most to do with just the fact that he's been in the system longer. But no, I think Hauser definitely has as good of a shot to win the job as Kim, no doubt. Do you think there's any chance AJ comes off the bench? I don't think so. Now, unless Jeremy Fears just comes in and looks like a freshman All-American. But even I can't envision it. I think he did sit. I think he did come off the bench one game this last year. Um, I think the only way this happens is if you just can't keep like a Cohen Carr or a Jeremy Fears, or maybe even just the bigs like off the floor, and so you can't afford to have three guards on the court at the same time. I'm not sure, but I don't think I can't see the scenario where AJ's coming off the bench on a consistent basis anyway. Any thoughts on that, Aiden?
No, I don't see him coming off the bench at all.
Okay. I think that's all the. Let's see. We got one more here. What are the odds both Kim and Hauser are on the team week 5? High, over
Yeah.
90%, and that's probably lowballing. I don't think either one will transfer in season, mostly just because even if you lose the job, you're one play away from being on the field. And so after the season's over, that's when this discussion, I think, becomes a discussion. But as far as week 5, I think both guys are on the team. I would give this like a 98%
Yeah.
on the odds that both guys, especially like week 5. So let's see: Central Michigan, Richmond, Washington. First Big Ten game is, shoot, I shouldn't have done this because without pulling it up, but I'm just trying to think like who those first two Big Ten
I think it's
opponents are.
Maryland or Iowa. So yeah, I mean, I think,
Yes, it's
yeah,
Maryland and then Iowa.
yeah, Maryland, Iowa.
No, I think they're both on the team. Again, you're one play away from being the guy if you're if the starter gets hurt, and so yeah, I think both guys are going to be there throughout the whole year, like not even just week 5, but like all the way through. I think both guys are being on the team.
Right.
All right, with that, appreciate the retention rate. We had a pretty good retention rate tonight. Appreciate all the questions. We're gonna try to maybe do this during the season too, where we kind of let you guys take the discussion and ask questions, and it'll be fun to react to like what we see on Saturdays too, going forward. But and we'll talk about like what our weeks are going to look like a little bit, as far as I'd like to do like once we're in season, maybe a couple podcasts a week, maybe reacting to the previous game and then previewing the next game. Me and Aiden got to talk about that a little bit because he's got to go to school still, and we
Yeah.
got to make sure we're not putting too much on his plate so he can graduate. So,
Yeah, that's good.
but yeah, appreciate you guys tuning in. As always, please subscribe to the podcast. I will say that we've had really good like our subscription numbers have climbed the last week and a half or so, and I really appreciate that. So tell your Michigan State buddies about our podcast, our YouTube channel. Keep growing that. We're trying to get to uh, 200 subscribers before the season starts. We're at like 185, so we're really close. And then would love to keep growing the YouTube channel as the season gets going here. So spread us around. Appreciate Keys to Wisdom. You said that you kind of dropped a line on Locked On Spartans for people to come over. Appreciate that. Spread us around because we're looking for to grow our audience. So appreciate you guys, and we'll see you next time.